Welcome to the October edition of What's in Bloom at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. Each month we put together a selection of plants that are in bloom in that particular month, and we prepare a handout for visitors that lists them. So we're going to walk you through those that are on this year's What's in Bloom for October. There are lots of desert daisies, and some of them make spectacular displays in the springtime in the desert and a good year. And this is one that's done very well for us here at the Ruth Bancroft Garden, Balia MultiRadiata, coming from the southwestern US and southward into Mexico. It not only has these beautiful yellow flowers, but dissected blue-gray leaves that are attractive in themselves. Balia MultiRadiata. Many people don't realize how abundant Opuntias are in the United States. Opuntias being the scientific name for the prickly pear. So besides a couple of New England states and Alaska and Hawaii, every other state has a prickly pear somewhere or the other. Now they're obvious if you're driving along the freeway in Arizona, but not so much in Illinois, but they're there. This is one of the California ones. This is Opuntia vaseyi, and it occurs in the foothills of the San Bernardino Mountains just north of Los Angeles. Opuntia vaseyi. Australia has lots of representatives from the Protea family, and this is an example. This one is called Banksia Heliantha, and it comes from Western Australia on the south coast of the state of Western Australia. Used to be that this plant was in the genus Dryandra, but all the Dryandras got put into Banksia, and so now we call it Banksia Heliantha. It's got wonderful serrated leaves and these yellow flowers. They're a little orangey at the bud stage, and then they open yellow at the middle and brownish on the outside. A lovely plant and can be used for a cut flower. Banksia Heliantha. There are lots of wonderful ornamental grasses, and this one is Bouteloua grassless, native to western North America. Its common name is blue grama. And this one is a cultivar called Blonde Ambition, referring to these little flower heads that look like little blonde mustaches and make a wonderful effect when the light catches them. Bouteloua grassless, Blonde Ambition. Almost everybody is familiar with aloes because of their long history of medicinal use going clear back to the ancient Egyptians. But in the horticultural world, they tend to be associated with winter color because many of them do bloom in midwinter. But here's one that blooms at this time of the year, Aloe reitzii. It comes from northeastern South Africa, and it has single rosettes without a trunk, as you can see, and then these wonderful spires of orangey flowers in the fall. Aloe reitzii. Agaves, or century plants, are prominent features of the desert landscape in the southwest United States and also in Mexico. And they have relatives called manfredas. And manfredas differ from agaves in that their leaves are soft and pliable, sometimes even deciduous. And they have a shorter, less grand inflorescence than an agave does. But they're very closely related, and some botanists favor including all the manfredas in agave. In any case, in recent years, there have been a number of crosses made between manfredas and agaves, and these are called xMangaves. And they've become a big presence in the horticultural world, which we didn't see before. And so this is one called Inkblot, and the name refers to the purple splotches on the leaf. And a lot of xMangaves have this feature, and that's because manfredas often have purple blotches, which regular agaves do not. This one, Manfreda Inkblot, is xMangave Inkblot is just about to come into bloom, not quite open yet, but we do have pictures of the open flowers so you can see what they look like. xMangave Inkblot. This shrub with the red flowers is named Russelia equisetiformis, and it comes from Mexico. And the common name is the firecracker bush, and I think from the little flowers you can see why. It's a long blooming plant, blooms all summer long, and it doesn't get very tall, and the leaves are rather inconspicuous. You see more stem than leaf when you look at it. And the name equisetiformis means resembling an equisetum or a horsetail, which is a totally unrelated plant, but it also has a very stemmy appearance. The Russelia is an easy plant to grow as long as it doesn't get too cold. Russelia equisetiformis. Euphorbia is a very large genus found around the world, and they range from little tiny weeds to large trees, and are so variable that you would never think they all belong together in one genus if it weren't for the flowers that tell you that they do. They have an unusual flower structure called a cyathium, which is a little cup with glands around the outside and tiny stripped down flowers in the middle. And the appearance of these cyathia varies greatly from one to another. This one has green and yellowish white on the cyathium, as you'll see from the close-up picture. And this one is a hybrid. So they come from South Africa and they hybridize quite readily in the garden. And these seeds are released explosively. So they go flying around. And this one just came up in this spot all on its own. A wonderful medusoid euphorbia. Erythros means red in Greek, and that's the source of the genus name for this bush, Erythrina bidwillii. So the flowers are obviously red, and so are the seeds, as are many erythrinas. Now, some erythrinas are trees, and other ones, like this, are a bush, and this one's actually a hybrid. So its parents come from one from North America and one from South America, and they make this wonderful free-flowering bush. And then in the wintertime, when the cold weather comes, it loses its leaves, and we chop it right down to the base, and every year it comes back and does this all over again. Erythrina bidwillii. Agaves, or century plants, are very prominent plants in a lot of desert gardens in places like California. And usually they have very big, wide, strongly fibrous leaves like the typical century plant, Agave americana, but some of them have a very different appearance. This one is Agave striata with very narrow needle-like leaves and a much smaller inflorescence. So here you can see the flower stalk coming up, and also unusual for its flower color with the green flowers. This is not an uncommon plant in northern Mexico, and it can flower almost any month of the year, although more in spring than other times. But here it is in flower in the fall, Agave striata. Opuntia is a large genus and one of the few groups in the cactus family that's found both in North America and in South America. This one here is Opuntia leucotricha from central Mexico, and it has a wonderful flower display in the spring, and then at this time of the year, these beautiful fruits, these little round pale yellow fruits. They are tasty, but really there's not very much fruit for the trouble of getting at it, and they are covered with little tiny spines all around the outside and are hazardous to get into the inside unless you've despined them first. But anyhow, this one is one of the taller growing Opuntias. In other words, it makes a trunk, whereas a lot of the other ones are lower growing and do not make a trunk. The name leucotricha means white hairs, and it refers to the way that the old spines on the cactus persist, and as it becomes woody and forms a trunk, they look like white hairs on the trunk. Opuntia leucotricha. Cereus is a genus of columnar cacti found in the Caribbean basin and southward into South America. This large plant next to me is Cereus hildmannianus from South America, one of the larger growing ones. And as you can see, it makes many, many arms over time, becomes a massive plant, and its common name is the apple cactus. And that's because after the large white fruits go by, it makes these smooth, round fruits that start out kind of purplish, but then turn pink when they get ripe, and they are delicious to eat without any spines, like some of the other cacti have, and therefore very easy to eat, and also quite delicious. Cereus hildmannianus. The South American tree above me is Seba Speciosa. The old name was Curator speciosa, but then Curator got lumped into Seba. A lot of plants in this genus, Seba, have spikes on the trunk, and this is no exception, has lots of spikes on this individual, although there are certain individuals that don't have the spikes on them. But Ruth liked spikes, so she picked one that had them. It is a spectacular tree bursting into bloom in the fall when most other trees are not blooming, and these large pink flowers with a whitish center are so showy that people are just amazed when they come here in the fall and see it in full bloom. It is a tree that's at the edge of its cold tolerance here in Northern California. And on our coldest winters, it can get a little damage on the branches, but it has sprung right back and put on a great show in the fall. Seba Speciosa. This plant is Malefia Croseia. It's a member of the ice plant family, and like many plants in that family, it has a spreading habit, creeping like a carpet along the ground. The ice plant family is noted for its brilliant flowers, and a lot of them, like Lampranthus, for example, make a big burst of bloom in the springtime, and then that's it for the year. Malefia doesn't do that. It has flowers here and there almost all year long. So we value that. It's continuing production of flowers, even if it isn't as dense of a flower display as a Lampranthus is. The bright red-orange flowers with a yellow center are quite showy. And this plant can be a little bit invasive in warmer places in Southern California, but not here in Northern California. Malefia Croseia. This plant is named Siphastema Jutei, and it belongs to the grape family, Vaseyi. And I guess you can see the fruits bear a little bit of a resemblance to grapes, but don't be fooled, they're not edible. In fact, maybe even a little bit poisonous. This plant right now, with its large fleshy leaves, totally hides the middle of the plant. But in the wintertime, it's deciduous. All these leaves fall off, and then the big fat trunk with its peely bark is on full display during the dormant period. Then in the springtime, new leaves come out, and you get this look again. This is a little bit on the tender side, so we have it here in our covered bed. So in the wintertime, there is a plastic cover put on it to protect it from the extremes of cold that we get in the wintertime. A wonderful plant, Siphastema Jutei. Every family has a type genus, that is, the genus whose name is taken on by the family as a whole. So for the stonecrop family, Crassulaceae, the type genus is Crassula. And they're mostly from southern Africa and mostly quite small. This one is Crassula rupestris, a dwarf form known as Tom Thumb. And it's got little tiny white flowers that are just coming along right now. They bloom in the fall and into the winter months. And this is more of a usual size Crassula. There are some large ones. A well-known large Crassula is the jade tree, Crassula ovata, that can get to be several feet tall. But that's a giant among the Crassulas, and Tom Thumb is more on the usual size of a miniature plant. Crassula Tom Thumb. Echeveria is a large and highly ornamental genus in the stonecrop family, Crassulaceae, and most of the species in cultivation come from Mexico. They do range as far south as South America, and one even makes it into Texas on the north side, but mostly Mexican plants. And a lot of the Echeverias are smaller rosettes, known in the horticultural trade as hens and chicks, but some are a lot larger, like this one, Echeveria gigantea, whose name reflects that large size. So it has big spoon-shaped leaves and tall spires of flowers that bloom in the fall and into the winter months. And here we see it with the multiple flower stalks coming out of the rosette and the great big leaves down at the base. Echeveria gigantea is not a difficult plant to grow as long as the temperatures stay above 27 degrees or something like that. It's not an uncommon plant in southern Mexico and an easy plant to grow as long as it's warm enough. Echeveria gigantea. This aloe here is Aloe Luciana. It has not been in cultivation for very long. It was named by Tom Cole when he was doing research for his book on the aloes of Uganda. And there aren't very many aloes from Uganda that we see in cultivation here in California. But this one is a wonderful plant, a stemless rosette of arching green leaves, and these flowers in the red to orange range, or maybe orangey yellow sometimes, that come in late summer to early fall. Aloe Luciana. Grevillea is a large genus in the Protea family, native to Australia. And most of them are bushes, although a few can get up to tree size. And there are quite a lot of species, but also many, many hybrids. And this is one of the newer hybrids, Grevillea King's Fire, which has really done well for us at the garden. It blooms almost nonstop all year long with these wonderful fiery red sort of bottle brush wands of flowers. Grevillea, King's Fire. This is an aloe hybrid that I myself hybridized back in about 1990, and it has two unusual parents, Aloe Hildebrantii from Somalia and Aloe laborana from Uganda. So you might think a plant its parents come from Uganda and Somalia might not be hard enough to grow here in Walnut Creek, but this one has been in the garden for decades now and done quite well, although it is important to note that it's in the bed that gets covered in the winter, so it does get some protection in the winter months. In any case, my inspiration for making it was I like yellow flowers and I like plants that flower in the fall when not everything else is in flower, and this one really fills the bill. Aloe laborana x Hildebrantii. Glotophyllums belong to the ice plant family, Isoaceae, and they come from the southern part of South Africa. Mostly they have pretty rubbery leaves, and usually they're bright green, but this one, Glotophyllum oligocarpum, has a more gray-green or bluish-green cast than the others. It blooms in the fall. You can see the yellow flowers on it right now, and then afterwards it has seed pods, which most of the time are closed up like a little fist, but after a rain, they will open up, and then the inside can be exposed and the raindrops can splash out the seeds. Then when conditions dry, it'll close back up again. Glotophyllum oligocarpum. That brings us to the close of our October edition of What's in Bloom at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. Remember, we have a wonderful website, and you can go to this anytime, even if you don't have time to come to the garden, and you can see photos of plants on our Instagram or on our Tumblr pages, and you can see articles about plants on our plant highlights, and you can learn about events that take place at the garden as well. The garden is a wonderful place to visit in person if you're near enough to do that, and there's something going on all year long. Thank you for visiting the Ruth Bancroft Garden.